Welcome, Bridge Builders, to another episode. Today I have in studio with me James Linton. He recently discovered the podcast through a mutual connection that we have. We can maybe get into that a little bit. And he is a active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So today we kind of wanted to talk about a little bit of what maybe is happening, quote unquote, between our groups, right, so to speak, and what could be better about that, what we should be doing better. I mean, not getting into the philosophies of shoulds and whatever.
Right,
We'll leave that for the philosophers. But anyway, James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mitch. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, cool. Any introductions you kind of want to give about yourself?
Yeah, so I think the reason I'm so excited to be here is because like you said, I'm kind of a new listener to the podcast. My wife, who knows you from pharmacy school, had glowing things to say, of course.
Thanks.
She is also an active member, but she never served a mission. I think she grew up in Kaysville. Like, it's kind of so when she heard about your podcast, she was really intrigued, and she's been learning a ton from the podcast, and I've loved it too. And so she said, hey, I think you have some interesting things to say. You should hop on and just see how we're going.
All right. Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah. So I guess my first question for you is kind of like, why do you want to be a bridge builder?
I think it's because it always makes me sad when something gets in the way of somebody like living a good life, right? Like, we're supposed to, in my mind, be happy and be loved. And whenever I see anything get in the way of that, politics, religion, whatever, that's something where it's like, okay, we can do better here,
yeah,
right? Just as people. And so, and of course, being an active member of the church, my family's very strong. I thought, and I've seen this kind of weird relationship that takes place between not in all cases, but in some cases, between members of the church and ex-members of the church. Like, it feels like there's kind of in my circles, like, not knowing what to do with the other kind of person, right? And that can be really damaging in like a family setting or a coworker or friends. Like, there's a lot of scenarios that could be damaging that I've seen. And so your project of like, hey, let's make a space where we're not debating anything. It's more of a question of, okay, how do we bridge that gap? I just have seen that gap so much, and I'm like, yes, that is a project
cool
I want to be a part of.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's kind of the whole reason I started it. Like you said, I kind of see in my own circles as well, it's maybe danced around a little bit.
Yeah.
At times we'll kind of jump in for a conversation, but then things can kind of get heated or whatever, and then we'll back off, and then we won't talk about anything for 6 months to a year, So, and I think when it comes to belief, especially religious belief, political beliefs, it really is like, I think maybe some of the reasons that it's not socially acceptable to talk about those things is because they're such a core part of a lot of people's identities.
Yeah.
Right. And people can get really strong feelings and feel like they're being attacked, feeling like they're not being heard and so forth, and just kind of going with that. So, do you have any experiences like that you've seen, anything like specifics, or even just like broadly specific, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of ex-members and members of the church kind of like disagreeing and maybe what they could be doing better?
Yeah, I think the examples that come to mind are some friends of mine who I remember a specific friend who her sister, was having a really hard time within the church, and her sister basically made the decision to leave the church. Mm-hmm. And actually, by all accounts, her life improved, and she was able to be happier, and like, there are all these things. And so this led my friend to really kind of question the church's place in her life, and especially seeing how people, treated her sister or things like that, where she began to wonder, like, wait a minute, is there, I guess, other ways to be happy? Like, it started this whole kind of line of questioning for her. And being like such a close friend to her and understanding her like goodness, just believing in her goodness as a person, I'm just like, wow, I think it would be sad for me to take that questioning as anything other than like supportive and loving, right? Yeah. As a friend. And then I saw, okay, but that's not how everyone's reacting to her and how people reacted to her sister. And so that's probably the most like salient experience that I have.
Okay.
One question I'm curious about from you is like, as you were leaving the church, did you run into these things? Like, what were some of the things you found I don't know if the most difficult is the right word, but what were some of those? Was a gap opened up? Like, what did that look like?
Sure.
How is it different between people? Things like that.
Yeah, I think maybe for me, it was a surprise to a lot of people. The way I guess, announced, like, I announced, like, over social media that I was leaving the church, which some people feel strongly for and against. And I've gotten kind of messages on both sides of that. And so I had some people kind of come out of the woodworks like, hey, like, I have questions too, you know, and so forth. And where I left somewhere recently, I'm like, oh, I had no idea, you know?
Yeah.
And then I had other people who were just like, kind of expressed like disappointment, which I can understand. There's something about having a shared belief in, I guess you could say, the truth of the universe, and like feeling like, hey, like, we have the truth. Like, why would you distance yourself from that?
Yeah.
That made people just kind of like question and wonder. And they were like, was it anything like specific? Kind of like some of those tropes, you know, of like, well, did you just want to like sin and party or whatever? Did you have some experience where you were offended by a member of the church or like of your ward and stuff like that? And I just kind of like shared my experiences, and some people were accepting of it. Some people were just like, okay. And then they shared their testimony, trying to like get me back. And I'm just like, oh, okay, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's such a, I guess overall it's a heated topic, right? And I had like some people just kind of unfriend me. Yeah. Which for a lot of people who leave the church, we kind of go through an angry phase. Yeah. If you haven't noticed.
Yeah, sure.
And there's that stereotype of the angry ex-Mormon, right? And I think there is some validity to that a lot of us do kind of go through this anger phase of, the best way I can compare this is like breaking up with somebody that you were really close to, right? Whether it be a friend, family, usually a romantic partner, right? And you just feel like really hurt. And maybe you say some things about that person that are true, maybe that are untrue, exaggerated, so forth. But you just kind of want to like get that out there. And some friends will support you in that, others may not. But I don't know. That's kind of my experience, like stepping away.
Interesting. Did you find like, I guess the question that I want answered from someone in your shoes is something like, were there like negative experiences like, did it negatively impact your relationships? And if so, like why?
The biggest relationships that were impacted were like the direct ones. My parents, my siblings, my wife initially. And on the periphery of that, like close friends, but with them, not as much, not to the same degree. I think the biggest thing was like family for me. And then also like former mission friends, and so forth. So it's a hard line to walk because I want to like express my feelings and like things that kind of did lead me out, but I also don't feel like this burning desire that like, hey, I want you to come with me. Yeah. You know? And some people like put up the guardrail and like the defense of like, if you mention anything critical, I'm going to like come back at you, like reasons why you're wrong, so forth. Right. And then I can like come back with them like, oh, well, did you know this? Like so forth. And anyway, it's just, I don't know. And then just kind of this feeling of that we had an eternal family with you. I think this is me, I guess, supposing it, like thinking back to like my member mind. If I had a family member step away intentionally, because there's like a difference of just like being inactive, you know? Yeah, sure. But like intentionally stepping away is like, oh, well, maybe you don't love us. Maybe you don't want to be with us. Because like that's kind of the core tenet and doctrine of the church is that families are eternal. Families can be together forever, right? And so by stepping away, I think it may be perceived that that's the reason why I'm going away is I don't want to be with you. Whereas like that's like so far out of the question, you know? Right. And I had a previous guest here a couple days ago who mentioned that like doctrines of the church are really good at the eternal perspective, but maybe in the here and now, it's a lot. It doesn't always like apply, and I think this is kind of one of those situations, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I agree with that a lot. I think one of the things that that really interests me that I want to talk about is like conceptions of how people view each other, and I think that's one that is really striking to me is the conception of ex-members as like people choosing to be damned to hell, basically, and say like, hey, I'm leaving. At least that's how, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, you can view like a non-member. There's this doctrine in the church, right, where if you have never received the truth, then you can just learn it and you'll be okay in the end. But to give it up is its like own, like not unpardonable, but like seemingly more unpardonable sin, right? And I think that creates, I think that's a huge part of this gap is this idea of, oh, you've just chosen a sinful life and in doing ruined something good or attacked me personally, something like that. And I think one idea that I was talking to some friends about this last night, and one of them shared something I thought was very profound. They said, well, I think that's a lot of times just kind of a myopic view of an eternal, it's kind of a twisting of an eternal perspective, right? Because at least, and I don't know if this is stepping too far into just doctrine, but
no, that's fine.
One thing we believe is in repentance after death, right? And so to say, regardless of what decision someone's making, to say, oh, you've now forfeited your eternal right, I think it's always going to put you in this mindset that I'm not sure is the correct mindset that you should have towards a fellow human being, a fellow family member, a fellow friend, when, I don't know, like I don't think you can really, you don't know that, right? You don't know that that's actually the case.
Yeah.
And so why would you forfeit a great relationship and continue? And so anyways, that's what I think when you say that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. As you were kind of saying that, something that came to mind is, this eternal perspective thing. But then there's also the here and now, like what's going on. And so for instance, tragically, an extended family member passed away a few years ago, and he had left the church before he died. And then after the fact was posthumously baptized, rebaptized in the temple. And I just kind of felt like so torn with that in a lot of ways. Like,
interesting.
Because in my mind, like, I don't even believe in God anymore. Yeah. So it's kind of like, well, it's just, it's just a ritual that people are doing. Like, it has no bearing or whatever, right? If this person just ceased to exist, doesn't have like an afterlife, like
why would he care? What they're doing?
Exactly. They don't even care, kind of thing. And then also, but then also just kind of feeling like, is that respecting like their wishes per se? Like,
that's interesting.
Yeah. But then also, like, what are the wishes of the family? Like, the family want to see this family member again, and they want to be with them for eternity. And in order to do that, they need to be baptized. So, like, these are kind of the questions that I think the doctrines of the church don't really have like a super clear answer about, and that maybe causes a lot of confusion amongst us,
Oh yeah, I think that could easily cause a rift, right? Yeah. Like, I think it's totally valid to say, wait a minute, are you respecting his wishes? Totally valid for the family to say, we just want to care for this guy, and we're doing it in the best way we know how, right? Easy for that to cause a rift, but also not so hard to say, look, I see where you're coming from. I hope you see where I'm coming from, and we can hopefully make something work. Yeah,
and in the end, I didn't like mention anything. I want to respect them, and if one of them hears this right now, this might be the first time they're hearing my thoughts about it. So I'm sorry if that's the case, but that kind of goes, like deciding not to say something. I think that's a big thing that actually maybe both camps have some issues with.
Interesting.
In today's day and age, everybody has an opinion about something, right?
Yeah.
And then on social media, everybody has to post about that opinion.
Yeah.
And if someone posts their opinion, then there's a comment that's like contra that other opinion and so forth. And I think taking a step back, realizing that, hey, like, this one comment I'm about to make probably isn't going to change anybody's mind, especially if it's heated, especially if it's like using pejoratives, calling people names, so forth. Very strong language. Like, if you already belong to the camp that is making that comment, you're going to be like, yeah, hurrah, let's go. Yes. And then if you're in the opposite camp, you can be like, this person's just like inhuman, inhumane and so forth. And it goes back and forth. So I've learned, to just kind of bite my tongue on a lot of things. And I think that's one of the biggest ways to be a bridge builder is to just learn when to shut up a bit,
No, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got a note here that says, like, sometimes it's just that we don't see each other or we're afraid of offending. Can you expand a little bit on that? Like,
Okay, yes. This also came up when I was talking to somebody about kind of this. Okay, how do you view ex-members? Like, how do you think about this?
Yeah.
And one thing they said is, I could not care less about, well, that's probably not true, but like something to the effect of, I literally don't care at all in terms of how I'm going to treat somebody, whether or not they're a member of church. Do not care at all. However, because I think back to what you said about identity, I think it's so tied up in our identity that it creates this interesting dynamic where if I am proudly a active member of the church and this other person is, maybe a vehement ex-member of the church and proudly or whatever, then it creates this dynamic of like, I don't care. This is what my friend says. I do not care if that person is drinking, swearing, whatever. Like, that's just what they're going to do, and I don't care about that.
Sure.
But I don't want them to feel like I'm judging them. I'm worried it's going to cause them harm.
Yeah.
Just by the fact, I'm worried that it will cause them harm or at least discomfort or maybe an unease with my being there. And so in so doing, I sometimes am going to spend less time with ex-members of the church. Even though I don't feel anything like detrimental towards them, I just am worried about creating an awkward situation just because of our, conflicting identities.
Sure. So maybe like there's this kind of like, there's an unspoken rule all of a sudden, like, like I don't judge you, but I think that you might be feeling that I judge you.
Right.
But we're not clearing the air beforehand.
Yes.
And so therefore, especially I could see this like, in someone who's like a friend, but not like a close friend.
Yes.
Right. And so forth. But then I also feel like there are, maybe not judging is like the right way to put it, but there are feelings of like, well, I know that this isn't bringing. So for instance, I drink alcohol on occasion, right?
Sure.
And I know it's not like good for me, my liver, anything like that. Like, the only benefit is like sometimes the way you feel after drinking a little bit. Right. And, for some reason that's something I still choose to do and like social circumstances.
Yeah.
But there is this view of the word of wisdom and that, well, it's a sin, right? Sin is going against what God says. I believe in this God. Like, I feel like the views of like punishment from God are different across religions, right? So we'll avoid that necessarily, but at the very least, you're distancing yourself from God by doing this behavior. And that just kind of makes me sad for you kind of thing.
Yeah. So
I kind of give like the benefit. That's like the most gracious way I can interpret like judgment, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I just, like I know there's people in my life that in a sense judge me for that. I'm not saying that like in a negative way. I'm saying like they're using their judgment based off of their beliefs and what they've been taught and what they read in scripture to judge a behavior as like incorrect. And, I make my judgments as an atheist and for certain circumstances as well. So I don't think judging is necessarily like a bad thing per se, but I do think that, in this instance of your friend, like distancing themselves from situations just out of the fear of like feeling this judgment, I think probably one of the best things we can do is like, let's like clear the air beforehand, I don't know. Do you have any like thoughts about that? Like,
no, I think that's a good point. Like there is something like unspoken. And I think you're also right that it happens probably more on an acquaintance level than a true friend level. Cause you probably have to clear the air before you can have, that sort of close friendship.
Right.
What advice do you have on if say you and I are going to the Westerner or something, and you're going to drink
a local
alcohol?
club around here for those who aren't in Utah.
And you are, anyways, I'm going to come just say like, hey, like I I want to clear the air.
Sure.
Do you have any advice on like how that might be done effectively?
Yeah. I think because I have like been to a few bars, even somewhat recently with friends, and some of them are Latter-day Saints who like, I know there's teachings of even like the appearance of evil and like showing up at the bar and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But themselves, they've decided, I'm going to go to this event to hang out with these people. I'm not going to drink while I'm there. And like, this isn't even just like a Latter-day Saint thing. I think once I started like drinking alcohol, I kind of saw like this scene with it that like people like expect you to, in a way. And there can be kind of this pressure sometimes to drink a little bit more, whatever. For whatever reason, I don't know the psychology behind it, but anyway, but I think you're just kind of setting the boundary, or like, the boundary beforehand is like, hey, like for myself, I'm not going to drink anything. And for the person who is drinking, I think it's also, like how much are you going to? Because there's these different stages of inebriation, right? There's like, you take a couple drinks, you feel like this buzz or whatever, whereas you take like 5, 6, like you can be something that is not quite yourself and say things that you maybe don't intend. I think it would maybe be beneficial in that sense as like for maybe an active member or someone who doesn't drink in general, be like, hey, I want to spend time with you. I want to hang out with you. You can drink alcohol. I don't care at that point. If you do drink past a certain point though, like, and things are a little bit too rowdy, I may just excuse myself, just out of safety or just like disinterest, and like, hey, like, I don't feel like I'm connecting with you as much anymore. Is that something you're interested in? Just kind of like setting the stage and the ground rules for it. Like, if you're going to be partying a lot, maybe I just won't show up. And it depends on each person, some people may not care, but I don't know. Does that make sense? Like,
I think it does. I think it helps me kind of understand like, like setting expectations might go a long way towards bridging that gap of, I don't know if you're going to think I'm judging you or not. I don't want to put you in that scenario. So then maybe I just won't even worry about it.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think another big thing that just kind of on this topic of alcohol and like, is like respect the area you're in. For instance, I feel comfortable like if someone comes to my house who is not a member of the church, like, maybe pouring myself a drink or whatever. But if I were to go to someone else's house who is a member of the church, like, I don't think that's the appropriate, I wouldn't even ask in that situation. Yeah. Just kind of out of like, like that's their home, that's their space. Like, they've got their beliefs around this thing. And like, I would rather just like not touch that. The same thing, the few times I have gone to church since I've left, are usually for like mission farewells, homecomings, baby blessings, and so forth. Like, I dress up, I wear a tie. I do kind of push it a little bit where I don't wear like a plain white shirt. I do wear like a colored shirt of some kind, but like, I sing the hymns, and that's just kind of like a personal decision of mine. Like, I don't know, like I want to respect the spaces that people occupy and kind of the beliefs that hang in that area. You know what I mean?
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. It reminds me of another thing I was thinking about as we were preparing for this is there's a concept in cultural communication, right? So obviously in any conversation, you have two cultures at play, right? That's in our conversation is my culture and your culture, and a culture influences what we believe about the world, how we think about it, how we're going to respond, what we expect people to do or not do, right? All these things can happen. And when you and I, or any two people get together, there's a third culture that's created. And that is their shared culture, right? And I think there's a lot we can do as people of different cultures to make a third culture that's like friendly, right? And something where it's like, hey, we're going to go to the bar and I'm not going to drink and I know you are. And like, that's okay because we have, for whatever reason, we've done the groundwork or we've just been around each other long enough to be comfortable. Yeah. I think that can go a long way in families too, right? Like, look, I respect that you have your culture and hopefully they can respect that I have my culture. And when I'm there, we have this new shared scenario where we're both aware of each other. And I think you can do a lot to make that a comfortable space, even if you have two wildly different cultures. Yeah. So anyways.
No, I agree with that. I think part of that that kind of shared culture is like, especially in the Latter-day Saint ex-Mormon space, there is this kind of thing hovering over. It's like, are they going to try to bring me to their side? I think that's like a common fear,
totally.
Because ex-member, like, you're in a cult, right? Or whatever kind of stuff like that. And the member of the church might, there's the fear that like, oh, what if they start bearing their testimony to me and kind of stuff and like start preaching or whatever. Like, I think nobody likes that feeling of receiving,
of being preached to, either that you're in a cult or that you ought to be back in,
or something like that. So, I think like but also like those conversations, I don't want to like completely avoid them, but I think there should be like a stage set. There should be like, that's like a special thing.
Yeah.
Where like, let's set some time aside. Let's do something where like that conversation can be had if we want to have it. If we don't, like, we don't have to touch it or whatever. But I think just at the baseline, just having this understanding of like, if the other person wants to come to my side, so to speak, they know where I stand with that and what they need to do so, like I kind of have this like shared understanding with like my family, I guess. We've never really talked about it, but like I feel like they know that I know if I want to come back, like I know how to do that. I can talk to them, like I know the process, and I know that they know if they want to know certain information about the church or whatever, view my points, like they can ask me and so forth. So just kind of like, I don't want to, because like avoiding the topic isn't always helpful.
Yeah, it's not what we're advocating for.
Right. It's set the stage. What's the appropriate time and place? It's not at the baby blessing for the family. It's not necessarily at the bar, right? Yeah. Anyway, just kind of setting aside a time for like hard conversations. Yeah,
I like that a lot. I think that could go a long way.
Yeah, for sure.
It also makes me think of, I wrote down a quote I was reading yesterday. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
It says, "In defending truth, we can begin to believe we possess it all." And I think there's an idea of, regardless of where you stand on truth claims, it's easy to like really believe so fully that like what you know is the truth.
Yeah.
And the danger there is you might think that because you know something that you know, that you know everything, and that therefore you know especially what's best for someone else. And it's a tricky topic because in some situations in the world, you do know better than somebody else, or somebody knows better than you. And, what are you supposed to do? Just not try and help that person, right? Like, I think there's a valid argument for that. But more often than not, I think it's easy for people to say, no, I know what I believe is true. And it's like, I can't even have a normal relationship with this person or normal conversation without thinking about, like, I need them to be convinced of this truth that I know.
Right.
And I think you miss a lot because you may know, you may be defending truth and feel really good about that and may in fact be right. But to believe you have all the truth figured out and you especially know the details of someone else's life, like, I don't know, that makes me think of like that. Let's create these spaces where both sides are humble. That's what's going to work, right? As people saying like, I'm not going to discount what I believe to be true, but that doesn't mean that I have to believe that you're a fool who hates me, right? Or even a lesser degree of that statement.
No, I agree with that. I had a thought. It'll come to me in a second. Oh boy. Well, first off, it's like this. Okay, I remember. So, what do you think of like? Because this is something I've like kind of wondered about and just had questions like personally. Like, I have a lot of friends, or here's like a common phrase that I hear, usually directed towards ex-members of the church, especially those who are more critical online. Like they have like a YouTube page, a platform of some kind, and they say it's become your whole personality, right? And yet I also have friends like who are members of the church, and they as far as, like, if you were to look on their social media profiles, like, as far as you can tell, like, their whole personality is being a member of the church, you know? So I think that we get into this idea of, like, in order to build a bridge, I need to, like, I did say, you need to know when to shut up sometimes, but also, like, never talk about it ever. I don't know. Do you have any kind of thoughts about that? Like we've kind of talked about appropriate time and place, certain things, but, like, especially in, like, the online space, I think, I don't know. Are you on social media much?
Yeah, I mean, not heaps, but I do copywriting on LinkedIn, so I'm on LinkedIn all the time.
There you go.
Probably least religious and reactionary than some, but enough to see. I pioneered missionary Facebook work, so I saw plenty of COVID missionary. So we saw plenty of trying to figure out how to be very vocal about your faith online and kind of the effects of that. Yeah.
So, tell me about some experiences as a missionary like that, because that was before, or that was after my time as a missionary. I missed it by just a bit. But.
Yeah. Lucky maybe. We also had 2 hours of outside time during COVID, so that was, pros and cons. But my experiences online, the first thing is a direct response to what you were saying is, I think a lot of the, it's your whole personality comments come because, maybe not all, but a lot come because you actually don't really know their whole personality. Mm-hmm. And it can be advantageous to project different personalities. And advantageous could mean self-interested things like you make revenue from a YouTube channel, or it could be like you're just signaling belief to people. Like, there's a lot of reasons you might want to project a certain personality online. Mm-hmm. But to make it seem, if all you know about someone is their online profile, their whole personality is this. Yeah, their whole personality that you know. Like, I just think there's so much to people that goes unheard of online. So I think that's largely a problem of medium.
Sure.
Which is why it's cool that you're doing this, right? It's a medium where you can consume it in the same way, but it doesn't lend to the same sort of reactionary emotional flare-ups or whatever.
Yeah.
In terms of what I have seen a lot online during my missionary service, it was really interesting to see missionaries. You just feel like this like righteous fire, and you feel like what you have to do is like stand up for truth. And they would do that by like denouncing people that they thought were being untrue, right? Whether that was, in one case, it was another missionary, and we had to go intervene in that kind of like Facebook duel between two of our missionaries who had different political ideas. Something like that, where it's like both sides felt like they were so correct. Yep. And they were defending truth, and it just like ended up in this clash between people that should be working towards the same goal, right? And that's common, I think, online. Other things you saw is other religions doing that to our religion, right? Mm-hmm. So I served in North Carolina after COVID hit, and I got sent home. And there was a ton of Christian, like angst towards LDS people online. And so often when you're trying to find people to teach through Facebook, you would run into people who were avidly against you. They think that you need to be saved.
Right.
And so I've also been on that receiving end of the religious fervor of like, you're going to hell unless you listen to me.
Yeah, no, right? That's fair.
And so, I guess I saw online a lot of, I think, people, members of the church, overstepping because they feel so deeply about their beliefs. And it's okay to feel deeply, but is commenting on an online post of someone you don't really know a good outlet for that? I would call it into question. But then I also know a little bit what it feels like to be on the end of someone saying, no, you're wrong. Like, and it seems like they only want to talk to me to just teach me, like, to accept Christ in their whatever way they think is acceptable.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, like, you're not really improving my opinion of anything or making me a better person in any way. Like, this is an interesting strategy.
Right.
So that's my experience online. I'm sort of a pessimist in terms of how well are you going to convert someone or be converted or be uplifted in the comments of anything?
Yeah.
Probably not that much.
No, I agree. There's something also just about the comment or like the medium of text.
Yeah.
That doesn't have inflection of tone, that doesn't have, and we often read these comments in probably the most negative light possible, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to, 2 minutes of us talking here is so much to type out. you
Yeah.
know, like just the time you always have, or like you're just constrained in a lot of ways like that. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to kind of start this, and especially have one-on-one
Yeah.
or multiple people, at least like, 4 or 5 max people on one episode at a time. Because somebody said something one time on some other show, not even related to Mormonism, I can't remember, that it's really hard to hate up close.
Yeah, for sure.
I truly believe that if I were to have a 1-hour conversation with every person that I've ever interacted with online, I would maybe only dislike less than 5% of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas like my experiences with just the comments, I'm like half of them,
80% of the world is terrible. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So it creates this big pessimistic view of things. And so I just appreciate like conversations that we can have in person,
Totally.
Yeah.
I think one thing, when I was talking to people, that kept coming up is like, look, if you want to build a bridge, best way to do that is to be like, go find someone and spend time with them.
Mm-hmm.
No strings attached.
Yeah.
Like the idea that just like spending time with people is so valuable, and to do so with no strings attached is like a gift to them. Right. And anyways, I just thought like, yeah, probably the best answer is the simplest answer. Like if you want to go build a bridge, go spend time with someone, and it could go, I think, disastrously wrong. And there's a lot of, there's some risk inherent in that, but also a lot of, I think that's the only way to really do it. And I think you're right about this medium being something where I think you are doing it differently because you're saying, okay, let's sit down and let's have a conversation.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. What are some, let's talk about the Utah culture a little bit.
Oh yeah. I love talking about Utah culture.
Did you grow up in Utah?
Grew up in Lehigh. Yep.
Lehigh. Okay. That's right. That's where I live now. So.
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Honestly, great place.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoy it a lot. So, do you feel, let's just take like your high school years.
Okay.
Did you feel like you really fit in as like a member of the church? Did you not? Was there like things like does that make sense what I'm saying? So I guess like, for instance, for me, to give an example,
Please.
In high school, I was really I was an avid member of the church, right? Fully believed it. And yet I also had this like strong feeling of like being pro gay marriage. Kind of more from like the libertarian political side of things, where it's like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm not going to be like, why does the state have
Why
to
is it
tell
my
you?
job to?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I would just like, I don't know, within the church, there's often a lot of like conservatives, which often feel more strongly about that subject in one direction, right? And I just kind of felt like in the middle, like all the time about stuff. And maybe that's why like I started this whole thing, is like my whole life, no matter where I've been, I've just kind of like been this like nuanced, like laid back person. Like
Totally.
It's not that deep, bro, and stuff like that. So, I don't know. Do you have any like experiences that are kind of similar, or do you get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I do.
How the culture maybe fits.
So I had an interesting cultural experience growing up. So yeah, like I said, I grew up in Lehigh. All of my neighbors, I think, were members of the church. Always. Pretty much.
Yeah, same.
All my friends, members of the church. My best friend group in high school, who we still, they were groomsmen at my wedding. We are all members of the church, right? We had met through preschool, and we were all in the same ward. I actually had 0 non-member friends in high school that I can remember. I might have had 1 or 2, but like, of all my close friends, 0 non-member friends. When I was in high school, I had, how many cousins did I have? I had 60 cousins or something, and 20-something aunts and uncles, 24, 25.
Wow.
And none of them were even like less active.
Wow.
So I just had no experience of people that weren't members of the church literally until I left on my mission.
Okay.
You talk to people and like
yeah.
whatever, but I was and I felt like pretty much I did fit in. I also had the benefit of, and not everybody does, and I wish everybody did. My family is very, like, not necessarily accepting, but they're kind of they have an academic tilt in the sense that they are happy to, like, take questions and like, oh yeah, if that's a good question, that's a good question. Like, let's get to the bottom of it. Like, I think people can get afraid of, if they're so committed to an identity, they can be afraid of something that seems like it doesn't fit into their framework.
Yeah.
And I never really felt that from my family. I also am a little bit more probably on the progressive side in a lot of ways compared to the average person in Lehigh, Utah.
Sure.
But I never felt alienated. And I think that's largely just because the people around me were encouraging of those kind of like, oh yeah, if you believe that, like, I trust you. Like, let's talk about this and let's make it a discussion.
Yeah.
So yeah, never until, and then I went on my mission, of course, and I had all sorts of experiences where I'm like, wow, there's tons of ways to live in the world besides being a member of the church. And then I came back and went to the University of Utah, where I graduated in philosophy. And that was a very, one thing I loved about the philosophy program is it was almost like the inverse of my family, where their base assumption is like non-LDS. It's very materialist, right? Like it's a very that sort of view of the world, but yet they're very open to, oh yeah, come here with your religious questions. Like, let's talk about it. There was no animosity towards that.
Right.
And so I just really grew to appreciate all of those environments where, oh wow, like, yeah, we can disagree and disagree in a productive way.
Sure.
So I think it's really common to have bad experiences, and I just never personally experienced them, and have only mainly got this through friends who have been like, oh yeah, I've had this or that concern. And it's been like, wow, that I wish everybody had an experience like my experience. How can I provide that to other people?
That's cool.
Is kind of how I think.
Do you feel like kind of those were, so do you feel like your mission and your major changed you in a lot of ways? Or did it maybe just kind of like guide you to where you already felt like you fit in? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think some of both. Like, I think that I always have been a questioner, have been someone who is like suspicious, skeptical of many claims, right? And is very like, okay, like let's work this out. And that's my natural kind of inclination towards the world. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I've found people like that in and outside of the church, if that makes sense. But going on my mission helped me solidify, like, who do I want to be? Like, and now I get to have my own opinions. I don't live at home, and I get to have my own opinions. I get to do my own things. Okay, what kind of things do I want to do? And so going on my mission and studying philosophy at the U helped me kind of solidify, oh, this is how I want to be. This is who I am. And, if you don't like it, that's okay. Like, I think there's probably a lot of people who would disagree with what I think. And I think that's okay. I think that's their right.
Right.
And I think it's my right to still do my own thing. And of course you need to listen to people that are wise. And I try to do that. But yeah, I think I think I've always been this way. And I think those two experiences, one way they transformed me is by helping me be solid in those and then know how to fit in, if that makes more sense.
No, that makes sense.
So,
do you ever feel, if you don't want to go down this rabbit hole, like, we don't have to, but maybe with some of the things, like kind of this more openness that you have about like ideas and so forth, do you ever feel like a conflict with maybe church teachings in that? Because at least from my experiences and my interpretations of church teachings, it is generally more fundamentalist in a way. I'm not saying that like in the polygamy kind of sense, like all the way down that way, but like these are the fundamentals, and like this is like how it should be. And there's like things like doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, like that kind of phrase, which is very popular in the culture, just kind of like, it's like questions, nope, like we're gonna doubt those, and we're not gonna kind of open that. I don't know, does that ever feel like a conflict with you? And if you don't want to go down that, like, I understand, but
no, I actually enjoy talking about this a lot. Okay. I think there's a lot of how I kind of was raised is the simple version of like, this is a true thing. Your job is to not question it, right? But the more I've come to talk to people and grow, I'm like, I actually don't think that's the true church doctrine. So one thing that helps me resolve these, what could be conflicts, are in my kind of theological framework, I think there is such a thing as like truth, right? I just think that exists. And
like
I think,
capital T, like,
yeah, capital T, like there is something that is just true, right? And the church in its purest form would contain only and all capital T truth. Clearly, we are not there. We're not there. We have a lot of traditions and things that are part of the church that I don't think like are capital T truth. I don't think it would be really tricky for someone to make that claim. I think a lot of people wouldn't make that claim.
Sure.
So then as I'm thinking about, I think a lot of the things about the church that are wrong are tradition. I think a lot of the things that I think are wrong, I'm wrong about, and I'm happy. I'm like happy for that to be the case. Mm-hmm. Like my belief in what I need to do is do my absolute best to follow like capital T truth and the good. And I've just like chosen to be a part of the church for that. It really helps me in my spiritual growth. Like I believe most, if not all, of the truth claims of the church, but I also do not think, like I have this sort of like idea that like, yeah, if I don't think I'm so right that somebody else's experience like is wrong and they're not right too. Mm-hmm. I believe in capital T truth. I don't believe that I understand it fully.
Sure.
And so I'm doing kind of what I can. So when it comes to the institution of the church, I kind of see it in the same way.
Okay.
I think ideally it would have all capital T truth. I don't think that it currently does. I don't think anyone should think that it does. And yeah, it comes down to what I said earlier. If you can get so caught up in defending truth that you start thinking everything you think is true. Mm-hmm. And I just don't believe that. And then so that helps me kind of resolve any conflicts that come up.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Have you heard of like the, again, I don't want this to be like debate or anything like that, but like
I don't feel discussion. Like you're debating with me at all.
Cool,
so
cool.
Yeah. No.
I don't want other people to perceive like I'm just because I push back a little bit that.
And if you have your own like statements to make, please make them. Yeah.
Cool. Something that comes to mind is Brad Wilcox. Familiar with him? I think he made like the claim one time that like the church has the whole piano, whereas like a lot of other churches just have like a single key or two, kind of thing. Because that's what I feel like stepping away from the church. I just absolutely love and adore members because like we all have, was I talking to you about this? That was it Gandhi that said that there's as many religions in the world as there are people?
Yeah.
Was I, anyway, that, everybody just has their own lived experience and like what they've gone through and what they've been taught. And like, they just interpret things in a different way. Right. And so Brad Wilcox is like, he's interpreted it in that sense. So I feel like, but it just seems like to me, like the higher you go up in the leadership of the church, kind of the more thoughts you have like in that sense. Does that make
Sure.
sense to me? And so I think for me, that's kind of one of the issues I have with like the institution is that on the ground level, the grassroots, it's just like this loving environment. And then as you kind of step up, the red tape gets involved and like there are these more hardcore truth claims that we don't question and that we don't like go against. Does that make sense? Or
yes.
Do you feel that way similarly or do you object to that?
I would maybe object to the generalization that like the higher leaders are always more believing in truth claims like that. You might be true on average that that's the case, but
sure.
I would just point out that even if that is generally true, I think there's probably some generalization in there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm generalizing for sure. So.
Yes, and I just want to point that I don't think there's even anything wrong with that necessarily. So what I think about that is there's this like tension always between the institution of the church and the like, I don't know, capital T truth. Like, sure, like imagine God came down and ruled the world. That would look different than our institution of the church today, I would assume. And so there are some like interesting trade-offs that come with like, let's take the assumption that there needs to be, for whatever God's plan reason, that there ought to be some institution of the church. Just by having a large, globally like centralized, it's not completely centralized, but like fairly centralized organization, it becomes really tricky to deal with like nuance. And this is something you see in like government as well. We learn about this in philosophy is the more centralized you get, the more you need the moving parts to be like uniform so that you can administer them. And there's a lot of advantages to centralized government.
Yeah.
And one of the disadvantages is it's hard to like deal with all of the nuance inside of that organization. And so
is this kind of like the idea I feel like I've heard like in a sense the best governments are those who are like totalitarian, right? Like where there's I am saying in the best, as in like the most functional, getting like what they think is done. Am I making sense with that? Like,
I think I see what you're saying, and I think I'm like, that might be part of what I'm saying, but I'm taking a more like a less extreme view.
Sure. And I'm not saying like, there's human rights that
Yeah.
avoid like all that together. I'm just saying like the ones that like get the job like done that they want to are the ones that have like the most centralized power. Does that make more sense?
Okay, yes, I do see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think the way I would phrase it is in order to have a centralized government, it requires a certain level of bureaucracy. And it's really a claim about bureaucracy rather than form of government.
Okay. Yeah.
And that bureaucracy necessitates kind of the flattening of nuance in order to have a big, huge government that governs 350 million people.
Right.
Like, whether that's totalitarian or democratic, in order to tally up votes or take a census, you need to make all these claims about people fit them in a category. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And I think an organization like the church has those same limitations where, there are small things about people and cultures and cities and whatever that it's going to be really tricky to like dictate for them fully. And so a doctrine of the church that I hold very dear is the one about like personal revelation and saying like, okay, this, I can see why the institution of the church needs this, but that doesn't mean that every single thing the institution of the church puts forward is necessarily something I have to do. That's like, I think a lot of members would see that as a very dangerous statement. And even you could easily abuse that to say, oh, I'm going to do whatever I want and thereby lose a lot of what I think are the advantages of something like this. But I think it's true. Like, I think it's hard to teach that to a kid. So I think that's a lot of why it ends up in church culture. But there really is this idea of, if God put us in the world like just to know everything and see if we can figure it out, he would have set it up way differently.
Sure.
Instead, we have a world where it is tricky to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Tricky to figure out what is right in every scenario. And that tells me something about agency and learning and growth that says, yeah, you can have an institution, and if you let that institution dictate you, you have to understand that it loses the nuance of your life. And creating that like learning with yourself and with God, I believe in God, of course. But creating that kind of understanding is an important aspect of what God wants you to learn in life, I believe. Right?
No, that makes sense.
So,
are you familiar with Fowler's Stages of Faith?
Briefly, I actually think you mentioned them when we were talking about this earlier, but maybe it would be worth going.
And I'm also not the expert. I need to look it up. But I think the kind of gist of it is like at the beginning, people are in this black and white view of things. Like that's stage one, right? Like the church that I'm in is the truth and the only truth and nothing but, right? And then you kind of progress and there's like all these different things. So I really need to look into it more, but like at least the beginning, I do kind of know that.
And
part.
You can see how it would trend.
Right. But it also, I think, applies in other ways. Like I've heard like research that children don't do well with nuance until they're like at least teenagers, you know, like there is a sense that they do need the black and white. They do need the, like, no matter what, do not run into the street. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like kind of those, like
totally.
those kind of things, like to keep them safe, to keep them healthy. And even with like intellectual ideas, right? Like we say stranger danger, like not that everybody out there is a stranger, but like, you know, in the off chance that something does happen, like we don't want that. So it's like this give and take and so forth. So, but then as we age, as we progress, as we learn, as we have more experiences, then we do kind of start to see this nuance. I hope, at least. That's kind of like what I strive to do for myself. And to keep growing and to just like take in what I can and like how does that apply to me and so forth.
Totally.
And so I don't know. We've kind of gone off on this tangent, but I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it does. I think there's a lot to be said about like it's hard for an institution, a large one especially, to deal with nuance. You are a human that is an expert at dealing with nuance, right? And so you can, and anyone, like people, you in your life are not an institution.
Right.
You get to deal with nuance.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you get a lot of the, kind of like the beauty and serendipity of life, I think. And so, yeah, anyways, that's how I think when we talk about conceptions that members and ex-members have of each other, I hope that there's a recognition of all the nuance that might be in their faith experiences, their life experiences, the things they've learned, the things they've experienced. Like, there's just so much nuance that it's hard to prescribe. It's hard to be like prescriptive in that sort of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you'll do better off not really even trying.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. Well, man, I've really appreciated this conversation. Like, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come out here and do this with me. I still feel very spiritual. Like, I'm a very spiritual person. Ever since I was like a young kid, I felt like very spiritual feelings. And in a way, like, often when I talk with somebody else, like, this is where I get my new church, right?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I just appreciate like your views on things and what you're doing and the conversations that you're having with your friends, your family, and so forth, and that we can kind of share this on this platform for other people to listen to.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. I know maybe not everybody knows the rigors of pharmacy school, and even probably I don't, but I know how hard my wife works and how much time she puts into it. And so when I see you putting this together and doing the admin on it, I think this is something you care about, and I think that's extremely noble. And so I appreciate you doing it and putting it on. So thanks, Mitch.
Yeah. Any last things you want to say? Any, like, if people want to reach out to you, if you're open to that, like any social media handles or emails?
Yeah, you can reach me at most social media at Jimmer Linton.
I'll include that in show notes if you send me a text.
Good. So. And then you can reach me on LinkedIn too, James Linton.
Sweet.
It's probably the best.
All right. Well, cool.
So, yeah. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah.
I guess my last final say. If I were to sum up everything into like one,
make a sound bite for us.
Yeah, and maybe you should make one too after.
Sure.
But what I'm thinking is, if you want to bridge a gap, spend time with someone, no strings attached, and that time won't be wasted.
Yeah, I agree. And just remembering like the humanity in the other person.
Yeah.
Like, no matter who they are, what they've gone through, what they say, what they do, end of the day, I'm a humanist in a lot of ways, and I should at least treat you with the same respect I would. The golden rule, right?
Yeah.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So,
yeah.
Good
one
time.
more soundbite.
Sure.
Institutions are bad at dealing with nuance. Individuals can be good at it.
Right.
Like, see the nuance in other people and in yourself. And I think that's a good lens.
Yeah.
So.
And making that balance between, as a member of an institution, is like very difficult. I think we can both recognize that, and that we shouldn't pin either way. The institution isn't necessarily the people within it, and the people aren't the institution. Like, you need to make that distinction that they are the same but different, right?
Yeah. And I also want to caveat that I'm not like coming in here to criticize and say, the church is being run poorly or whatever. Only that like institutions generally have limitations. One of those is dealing with nuance.
I think if someone was to take that interpretation for you, they would not be giving you the benefit of the doubt or fully understanding like what you're listening to. So, well, cool. Thanks again. Join us next week for another episode of Latter-day Bridge Builders, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you want to financially support the podcast, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description as well. So thanks everyone. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks.